Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel where we are going to review the very last episode of Doctor Who Flux. Obviously, we missed last week, episode 5, because I was away. But you can still catch Liam's live reaction to that on his channel, which will be linked below, as well as our live reactions to the finale, which was pretty... I don't know the best way.
It was a finale.
It was definitely a TV episode. I think I enjoyed it overall.
I think I enjoyed it.
yes. It was episode 6, The Vanquishers. Which obviously when the episode title was revealed, everyone was like, "Ooh, what's it going to be? Who's it going to be? What's going to happen?" Loads of theories leading up to it, loads of questions that still needed answered. For example, even before we started watching the episode, I wrote a number of questions down or things that still need answering. So basically, where did the Doctor come from? What's the division? What really happened with the Flux? Bell and Vinda still needed their storyline completed. Dan and Di needed their storyline completed. Williamson still needed his stuff to be done. Sorman and Zior still needed to get their payoff. The Grand Serpent still needed to sort his plan out. The Sontarans still needed to do their jazz. The Dalek and Cyberman, how are they going to fit into stuff? And we got some answers, I feel. Some things have been left open. Some answers probably weren't as good as maybe they thought they would be. Or thought they'd be received. But what can you do? Right, let's see if I can try to explain the episode. So, the Doctor, everyone's in their separate places. The Doctor's stuck in between universes with Swarm and Azure, who are about to take over division, or at least take over the room where Tectayun was operating from with Harud. Dan and Yaz and Jericho are with Williamson in his tunnels, about to be killed by some Sontarans. Vinda and Di are stuck in Passenger, and Bell and Carvanista are about to be boarded by Sontarans. That's where we left everything. And then the episode brings everyone together, I think is the simplest way to put it. There are 3 Doctors involved, 3 of the same Doctor, rather than not your traditional multi-Doctor story. 3 different plot lines, I guess, 3 different main storylines, all converge, and the plot is eventually somewhat resolved in some ways. I think is that fair?
Sure.
So as you can tell, it was quite a complicated episode because I think it's been quite a complicated series, both production-wise and story-wise, which we'll obviously come on to. But for this episode, episode 6, what are your overall thoughts?
I think it's a satisfying finale that leaves a lot to be desired in how it executed some things. Would be my initial kind of upfront statement. I did enjoy it. I did have fun with it. There's a lot I liked. But it is one of those where for everything I'm like, oh yeah, that bit was really good. There's part of me like, oh, but this bit, I was like, oh, it just feels like Noah's Ark and the animals coming in 2 by 2, but a positive and a negative coming in 2 by 2, So yeah, I enjoyed it overall. I didn't hate it. I think, who knows what goes on really behind the scenes with everything and stuff, but I do think the writing left a lot to be desired in how certain things are wrapped up, or I think maybe it's budget, maybe it's just this was written at 4 a.m. on a Friday, as I'm sure a lot of Doctor Who is. It feels like sometimes things get focused on that don't need to be, and some things that should be focused on happen off screen or are in a throwaway line that you could easily miss, or just aren't mentioned at all. Yep. And I think that makes it quite frustrating at times. And it's just a few easy tweaks. I think you could have really nailed it with some of the answers we got. But yeah, I think for the Flux storyline, I am satisfied overall. I do think it could have been a lot better, but I also think it sets up some future stuff in an interesting way. But but yeah, there's a lot for me that just didn't need to be in there, and could have been used time-wise to actually develop the more interesting ideas that were kind of glossed over. And again, if you're going to gloss over them, why include them? I think this era does often shove way too much into episodes, and I think this really suffered because of that, this particular finale, especially when there's already so much shoved into the plot line itself. So yeah, I was frustrated with a lot of it watching it again. But overall, I still think I liked it. Could have been better, but I'm happy with this being how this story wraps up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Flux especially, I don't know how much of it has been pandemic impacted, whether they had all the stories written separately to go, and then they just had to try and merge them all into 6 episodes and cut things down. I'm sure there was some impact there, because it does feel like some of these storylines could have either had their own episode entirely and just been a focus of one episode and be done. Whereas some could have been 2-parters by themselves, and others were a big story arc. But it feels like because of the restrictions that they had to be like, right, well, we're just going to put them all into 6 episodes and then hope most of it lands as well as we wanted it to. And I think it's probably 50-50 in terms of the storylines that land. And I think once we go back and watch the series as a whole and sort of rewatch it in full, I think some things will have been made bigger than they ended up being. An obvious one I'm sure both of us will come on to later on. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the finale of it. It felt very big and dramatic. There are some excellent visuals in this, which I'll talk about later as well. And, you know, it had everything Doctor Who needs, you know, crazy, convoluted sci-fi, multi-Doctor style, monsters galore, explosions, sonic screwdrivering, you know, story arcs. It had everything that it needed to be for a Doctor Who episode, but perhaps maybe too much at sometimes. But
yeah,
what can you do? Well, I mean, I guess you could take your time right there.
Yeah, rewrite it or cut it out.
Yeah. We can't do anything, which is the issue.
Yes.
And I'm sure the debate about Flux and this episode will rage long into December before we get a new episode in the year, and then we'll rage long into next year until we get another episode, and which always happens, and it will keep. It's just a cycle. It doesn't matter who is the showrunner or who is the Doctor. There will always be debate around episodes and story arcs and all that kind of stuff, as there will be with anything that's been going on for almost 60 years. You know, there's plenty of there's too much stuff in there to not be controversial, really. But still, as with all the sort of formats on this channel, we normally have 3 positives and 3 negatives. I think I have a few extras for both this week, but they're only sort of small things. And we'll start with the positives, because we always start happy and end up depressed. So what is your first positive?
Jodie Whittaker.
Nice. She is one of my extras.
Yes, I think for me anyway, this was one of her best performances as the Doctor thus far. She got so much to work with, I think, in just being herself, in then bouncing off herself quite literally, because there's 3 of her in this. The kind of emotion behind the struggle with her memories and everything, and her trying to open up to Yaz at the end, and there's a lot of emotion with that as well. A few comedic lines there as well, and she has to play time, whatever the fuck that is, for a scene to kind of say, you're gonna die soon. So, you know, just in terms of like the big range, I think there's a lot for her to do in this one, more so than I think a lot of episodes do give her. So I think that's why she really did shine. And I mean, she's literally the glue that holds a lot of these storylines together in terms of plot anyway, because there's 3 of her to make every plot seem important. And I think, yeah, it's kind of a tour de force on her, really, like how much she had to kind of carry. And I think, you know, she really has shone in Flux, I would say. She's definitely been the shining star of it for me. And I'm glad that she's gotten a lot of good stuff to work with in this season. And particularly this episode, I think really showcased a lot of her acting ability. And yeah, she was really funny. She can kind of break your heart at times as well. And yeah, just a really strong kind of leading performance. She sells exposition like no one else, I feel. And there was a lot of it for her to do in this one in particular. Flux in general, she's had a lot of those. I'm going to tell you some exposition now. And when she's just like speculating about how she was split into 3 different people, and then the Sontarans plot and everything like that. She is very good at relaying that information and making it sound like she's really interested in it. And yeah, it's kind of the most boring dialogue you can get given as an actress, I think. So the fact that she does do that so well and make it quite engaging, I think is definitely worth all the praise. So I thought she was fantastic, as she always has been, don't get me wrong. But I think Flux in particular has just allowed her to really shine and give her a lot more meat to kind of chew. It helps, I think, that there was one less companion in the TARDIS team this year. But also she was just, from a plot standpoint as well as an acting standpoint, the kind of glue that held this episode together, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for me, it was the scene between her and the Grand Serpent. I think when he was torturing her, I was like, this is great. I like this.
Yeah.
And then she kind of, to me at least, felt a little bit sidelined, I think, up until that point. Obviously she had the conversation, I think, with Azure, but that was more Azure focused than the Doctor. But Jodie from sort of there onwards, and working with herself in theory, was great. I think, when she delivers exposition, I don't mind that it's being delivered, because sometimes it can be like, oh, it's just a big exposition dump, and if it's done by someone that's not interested, you don't care. But it's done in such like an engaging way that you're like, oh, okay, so, and you get involved. And I think that's helped not just Flux, but most of her series is that she's been able to deliver that pretty well, which is why, to me, it's never been such a big issue that there's always been scenes where it's just laid out in front of you, because I'm fine if that's what they want to do and that's how they want to tell it. Fine. Again, it's a family show, there are kids watching, sometimes it needs to be spelled out for people, which is fine, and she does it in an engaging way for people of all ages. And it always seems the case that an actor's last series as the Doctor is always their best. I think that's probably fair to say for at least the New Who ones. I'd say I quite like Capaldi's last series more than his most. I think maybe Matt Smith's is more level across the board, but I obviously prefer series 4 for David Tennant. Chris Ferguson only had the one in the first place, so that's still his best one. So it always seems to be the case, and hopefully this continues, and I'm sure it will continue into the specials next year. She was one of the sort of extra positives for me for this episode, because she is a standout, and she has to sell it so that it makes sense. If she's not committed, then the audience won't go with it, which is the main thing. But yes, my first positive, Eustachius Jericho.
That's my second one.
Yeah. When he cropped up in like the trailer for this series, I was like, oh, that'll be cool. Thinking it'll only be a one-off episode. And then when he stuck around after Village of the Angels, I was like, this is great. Like in every scene, he stole it from the other characters, which again is fair enough. He's quite a big actor. Good old Kevin.
Kevin McNally.
Kevin McNally. Gibbs. Joshua Gibbs. And I didn't expect him to stay around for as long as he did. But he was great in every scene. He was great in this episode. It was heartbreaking to see him die twice. Although I have a how he dies. It annoyed me the second time around, because he's like, I can't get out, and then the Sontaran comes and opens the door. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. Wait, you can get out, but you can get in. Fine, whatever, it's fine. I guess you just needed him. You needed him to deliver his final line to someone, and it was just convenient for there to be somebody else there, which is fine. I can let it slide. I think he really added an emotional weight to this episode that might not have been there if he unfortunately didn't die. There could have been emotions in other sections, but it's not laid into as much, which I'm sure we might talk about as well later. But I just think he was a great actor in this episode and the series as a whole. Definitely one of the best guest characters I think we've had in the show for the past few years, especially of Jodie's era. I'd say he's a standout. I hope that maybe they finds, whether it's Big Finish or some kind of spin-off, maybe they get him, Dan and Yaz back for like a Big Finish around the world in 8 days-esque adventure for when they're stuck in the past. I think that would be good to see more of that. And it's, it's a time travel show. He can always pop up at another time and have some time thing happen so that he never remembers meeting the Doctor or whatever like that. He's great. I hope he comes back at some form, just because he was excellent in this, and gutted that he died. He was the only he's probably the only person that did die in the whole series, really.
I think he was, like, in terms of main characters,
except for that guy that was apparently working for Kate Stewart. I think he's the only one that probably. Oh, and those blue people in the first episode where their planet got destroyed. They also died. But yeah, Jericho, Kevin, great, excellent, by far for me, like one of the positives of the episode, and if not the series, even though he's only in the second half. Yeah. So what is your second? Well, it's Kevin. So what do you want to say
Jericho.
about Kevin?
Easily the best supporting character, I think, in Flux. Considering he only showed up in the second half is quite cool as well, because I think early episodes is when the memes get made in the fandoms. And they're the ones that tend to stick, like Evil Dan, Carvanista and his fan art.
Don't Google that.
Do not Google that. My God, if you want to remain pure. Unless you're not pure, then go for it. But I wouldn't. But the fact that he then turned up in the second half and completely stole the show in terms of supporting characters for me. Fantastic performance by Kevin. Worked so well with Yaz and Dan, and that trio I thought was fantastic. I liked his kind of yearning for knowledge and his care for people. This one, a very forced death, obviously, to kind of try and get some emotions out of us.
He went, whoops, my better. Ring. Oh no. Man.
And then, Sontarans can't shoot Dan at point blank range, but they can shoot a ring as they're walking into the room, all budged between the door. It's one of those things. It needs to be dramatic. Someone had to go. But that whole final scene, his little speech to the Doctor, about like who else has had a life like mine, and his last line, like, "Oh, what an awfully big adventure." I thought that was a really nice kind of final line, because that's the last adventure he can go on is to see what happens next. And kaboom, he's reduced into nothing. Hopefully not too painful for the poor guy for now. Did they undo it? I don't know.
Well, I think there's still enough, I think, moving forward for them to maybe at the end of Jodie's last special do and it was undone type thing, but who knows? Because in theory, all the Daleks and Cybermen are wiped out now. They're not in the universe anymore. So,
because some people were saying like Storm and Azure, they did actually like restore the universe, and then they got stopped by time just before they were going to destroy it again, so let's begin their torture of the Doctor. So apparently everything's fine again, but I don't know if that's the case. And we had the whole thing with the Doctor being like, anything that's been compressed can be uncompressed, and that just didn't come to anything, so that seemed a bit weird.
I'll come on to some thoughts I have about that, sort of outside of the positive negatives, because I've got a couple of other notes that I want to touch on. But I think there's enough leeway there for them to do things.
Yeah, but either way, I really loved Jericho, and I didn't expect to love him as much as I did. But I liked him enough in Village of the Angels, but I think he really did shine in those last two episodes. Really came into his own. Fantastic performance, really great little side character. Very memorable, considering how much was thrown into Flux, how many characters they had to juggle, not particularly successfully for the most part, if I'm honest. He still stood out, and it was a really great little character, and I loved his whole little arc, and his ending goodbye scene I thought was very well acted and very well written. Jericho was my second positive. He was very, very good. Yeah,
best boy. So my sort of second positive is the Sontarans plan. Their sort of scheme. I really liked it. I think especially when it's like revealed about what they're doing, I'm like, now it all makes sense. I think that was the way they revealed that, and the way it was all the sort of hints were there for you to make it if you could make it. And then there was obviously the exposition scene, which is fine. But just, I thought it was very clever. It looked great, which again, I'll come on to. And it was very well done. And it was just so in character for the Sontarans to do this kind of thing. And it justified them coming back in the final episode. It justified having Daleks and Cybermen as well in the series as well as in the last episode. And yeah, it just was great. I kind of wish that was just it was them doing that outside of Flux, like that was just them doing it. But in another universe where the pandemic didn't exist, then maybe that would have been what happened. But I think that it was just very masterful, very well done. And it was definitely, I think, the highlight of the episode. It probably should have been the focus of the episode, but obviously with everything else that needed to be put in it, it wasn't. But it was very well done. I think that was maybe the one storyline that was written the best. I think was the Sontaran plan and how they were stopped. Which was fine. It was good. I think it's definitely the best moments of the episode come with the Sontarans. I'm sure there's one moment we'll touch on soonish about with the Sontarans. But yeah, I thought they were great, justified being back in it and making a return after already being defeated. And they also showed their intelligence. I think I criticized them in their first episode, being like, "You idiots! Why are you leaving your ships unguarded, or why are you all going to rest at the same time?" This kind of showed that they do have the intelligence there, the military intelligence. And if it was anyone but the Doctor, they wouldn't have been stopped. It was only because the Doctor was there that was, I guess, the only reason Flux existed in the first place, because the Doctor was there. But she only just defeated them as well, and she only just beat them, luckily, because they didn't kill Carvanista. If they killed Carvanista, there's a chance if they didn't escape the ship. So excellent. I really liked it. Sontarans are great, and I do hope they make a return. Probably not in the specials. I think we can do with a break until the next Doctor, but I hope they come back and are just as fun, I think. So what is your final positive?
The 13 and Azur scene, where Azur's talking all about why they're doing what they're doing and arguing philosophies and stuff, and they are all for destroying everything, and she just can't understand why the Doctor wants life to continue, which is a very interesting kind of viewpoint that I quite like. Very Thanos of her. So yeah, and they even test people, so there you go. But that was one of my favorite scenes of the entire episode. It's a shame that it took until the final episode for Azure to really impress me as a villain, but I think it did showcase what the actress can do under all that bloody makeup as well. She looks like a skull, and she can deliver a really great performance like that. Say what you will about Storm and Azure, I do think the people playing them have been fantastic. In Flux.
Definitely.
And yeah, that was easily her finest moment. And I love it when 13 goes one-on-one with one of her villains. I think that's also when she often shines. And yeah, I just liked that kind of argument, and finally exploring exactly why Storm and Azure were doing everything that they've been doing, kind of seeing an insight into what their goals were, what their beliefs are, what their motivations were. Probably a bit too late to get them, but we got them in a way, so I'm happy about that. And yeah, I just thought it was such a wonderfully performed scene between the two of them, and in particular, the actress who played Azure was fantastic. Rochelle, I think, was the actress's name. If I got that completely wrong, sorry, but you were very good. And yeah, I just loved the performance that she gave, and yeah, just a big standout moment for me. So I thought I'd give that a shout out, because we've talked about like an actress and a character. I wanted to like really get maybe a more plot specific thing in the positives as well, because I did enjoy some aspects of that. And that for me was easily one of the strongest scenes, not just of the episode, but Flux as a whole. That's one of my favorite scenes of the series. So yeah, that's another positive.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And I think you are right about it. Maybe came a little bit too late. Like it could have been something that maybe was put in episode 2, whichever one ended on Atropos with that cliffhanger. That could have been a good spot to put it in.
2, yeah.
Or maybe episode 3, something sooner. Because it's good that there's something other than I'm evil.
Yeah.
There's some reason why they're evil, or in their eyes they're not evil. Everyone has different viewpoints. And yeah, I do agree that scene is definitely a standout and could have done with more throughout the series, if not, a little bit more. Because I think Swarm got his nice big scene about explaining what he was doing, but Azure was very much just sort of in the background. I don't think they necessarily needed to be the two of them. They could have easily have just done one and rolled them into one. But it's fine. I think that scene is definitely a highlight, and it showcases definitely the Azure actress's talents, especially as you said, under all that makeup, which is always impressive in any Doctor Who episode, no matter what. Unless it's all from 55, where they just got the lip nose.
I love that we have Carbonista, and then you just look back and like, oh my god, they didn't even try.
No,
they literally bought that from a pound shop before they started shooting.
Oh Christ, never mind. My sort of third one, speaking of sort of the look, is the visuals of this episode, especially the destruction of the Dalek and Cyberman fleets. Yeah. I think it looks amazing. It looks so good to see all the ships arrive, and then all the inside, and the Dalek and Cybermen design are obviously iconic in their own right, but then seeing them all just get destroyed, and all the Sontaran ships on Earth is also a good visual. Sontarans on Earth itself is great. The Sontarans themselves, we mentioned in their episode, they look great still. I think the way they handled sort of Jodie being in three places when she was like in flux between all three of them, I thought was done quite well. And if anything can't be criticized, I would say most of the visuals in this whole series has been spot on, except for maybe one or two spots in episode 2, I think it was. But I think overall it's looked great for something that has again been worked on during the pandemic. So a lot of those CGI people have probably had to work from home and make this. It's just excellent, and that's also why a lot of video games that are coming out now, if they still work and they're still great, a lot of that has been done from home, and it's very impressive that they can do that. And I just think it deserves a special mention because it does look really, really good, as all of Jodie's era has, and that's probably a bit down to direction as well, which is great. I really like it, and I think it deserves a lot more praise than it gets, because people don't really, I think they take it for granted when it's good, and then when it's bad they point it out, which is unfortunate, but that's always the case with anything in life. You'll be fine, but then as soon as, like with the internet, you'll be fine, you'll be happy, you won't care that the internet's working, but then as soon as it goes, you'll be annoyed. It's the same with visuals.
It's kind of sad that like the best CGI is the one that isn't praised because it just looks so good.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's it for my main 3. Have you got any other positive points you want to hit on?
I think they might just come up during other discussions and stuff, but I agreed with everything you were kind of saying. Like, it did look fantastic. Like, they hid really well that this was made during a pandemic.
Yeah, because there's like, when the Call the Midwife Christmas special came out last year, you could see that they were social distancing. You could see that they were standing apart across the room and stuff. And I think there are moments in this when they are stood apart in a room, but it's quickly met with them being close together, so you never get the feeling of they're not there or they're social distancing, which is good. It's very well made. My sort of other additional positive, other than Jodie, is sort of the arc that Dan goes on. He goes from being very confused in the first episode and sort of bumbling around to then like just holding his own against this Sontaran in the corner shop in the scene. And I think he's a stand of that scene. He's definitely the standout because he's so like calm and confident and casual. I think it's great. And even when they come back through the door and it's like, oh, I think time's moving, not the location, is when I was like, that's, he's getting it. He's gone on that arc now. He's been with Yaz and for 4 years-ish, 3 years. So he's picked it all up and he can finally get it. And I'm excited to see him move on and see what happens in the specials. Hopefully he won't die. But I think maybe in the New Year's special, they'll all die once or twice by the sounds of it.
Quite a few times.
But yeah, I think he was just, and I mean, John Bishop, as we sort of mentioned at the start, we weren't sure how he was gonna go, because he's obviously best known for being a stand-up comedian in the UK. And for him to come in and just completely transform that and make the character his own, he's obviously become a big meme, which I think has definitely helped. It always helps when a character becomes a meme. It always sort of cements them in history. And I think Dan has definitely become a fan favorite character. Even though he's only had 6 episodes, I would argue.
I've really liked him a lot.
Yeah,
and it will be also. I'm looking forward to seeing this TARDIS team outside of the Flux story arc, because I'll see what they're going to be like. Yeah, and to see Dan and the Doctor actually spend more than a minute together will be nice.
Well, that's it, because they, other than the start of episode 2, that was about it. That was about it in terms of this TARDIS team. I think they obviously haven't been together since episode 4, start of episode 4 with the Weeping Angel.
Yeah.
And then they were separate. So it'd be good to see. I would argue that he's definitely moved above Ryan in the companion pecking order of Jodie's era, maybe above Graham.
Oh, wow.
I guess it depends who you ask. I would say for me, it's probably going to be Dan, Graham, Yaz, Ryan at the minute.
Yeah, I can see that.
But Bradley Walsh and John Bishop are 2 icons, and they're both great. And I really hope in Jodie's last episode we do get a scene with both of them. I think that'd be great, and maybe we will if certain production links are true. Maybe we will, but we won't know until it happens, which is always the case. Never believe the leaks, because there was some doing the rounds on Reddit before the series and they were completely wrong. So never believe whatever you read. You just have to wait and watch, and then make your judgment. Don't prejudge things. Looking at you, Spider-Man No Way Home. But yes, that unfortunately brings us on to our negatives, which again I have a fair few. My first one, and I think this is just because it doesn't make any sense for me. It's almost definitely a nitpick, is Diane and sort of how she reacts to Dan.
Right.
Just because she's done this, like, she's been trapped in Passenger. Obviously, she's been kept alive because the Sorma Azure think they can use her to get Dan or the Doctor or something like that. That's why she's still kept alive. And she's obviously been there on time. She figures it all out. She effectively learns how to break out of the system. So she's it's all made sense in her head what's going on. But then it's like, as soon as she gets out and sees Dan, she forgets that that's actually happening. She's like, oh, you were late. And then even when it's all over, she's like, oh, nah, I don't want to get a drink with you because I still can't believe you left me. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. His house got shrunk. I'm sorry. He was a bit preoccupied. He got kidnapped. So I think that it was just the unnecessary character switch. I think they could have had her figure it all out fine, have her and Dan have a conversation about what happened, why he wasn't there, and then sort of amicably decide, okay, well, I need some time to recuperate from this, and then not put it on Dan. I think it's because she seems to blame Dan for what happened, which I think is quite unfair. And I think that's sort of what unfortunately puts her character. It was sort of like, yes, she's great, she's fine, and then it just went, okay, never mind. Because again, she's one of the characters I think that doesn't get enough development throughout the series. She's in episode 1, then end of episode 2, when she's like projected out of Passenger's chest.
And then she's in Dan's scenes in one time.
Yeah, but
she's only not in episode 4, I think. And yet she doesn't really get much development. But
yeah, exactly. So I think that I could have lived with that. I could live with, not that much. It would have been fine. But it's just, it seems to not fit with their character to blame Dan for what happened.
It was weird,
Which is one of the big standouts.
Not to bring up a novelization yet again.
Yeah,
I think it's one of those things that would work better in a book. If you hear her thought process before that conversation, and like, oh, I see where she's coming from. But it's almost like that's written for her in the script, but obviously there's no way of actually telling the audience what she's thinking and what she's been thinking. So it comes across as very strange. Yeah, especially after like Vinder's like, oh, you should come and teach at the academy, and she's like, oh, the facial expression is like, oh, that'll be really good, as if she's gonna get into it.
But then it's like as soon as they break out and as soon as they're rescued, she's just like back to normal human, like, oh my god, what's going on? And then she's not seen for the rest of the episode. I can't remember when they break out. Does she do anything after that? She doesn't, does she?
I don't think so. No.
We next see her at the museum.
Yeah, I think she just stays in the TARDIS.
Yeah, so unfortunate, and there's a couple of moments like that where characters just sort of fall away, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, here you go. But we'll come on to that. So what is your first negative?
Oh, I don't even know which one to go first. Well, let's get all this out of the way. The unanswered questions / not very well explained answers.
Yeah.
Because I do feel a bit unsatisfied in a lot of them. I mean, just getting answers, fine. Maybe they're not the best answers in the world, but it's when they're maybe just not answered, or it's a throwaway line at some point that answered it in a completely different episode that explains something that happened, or is just kind of ignored. So what the fuck is time?
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure I get it, because there's a planet called time, and now they worship time as well. Time's actually also an entity that can take forms of things. I'm sure that's going to be something that maybe gets expanded, although it also feels like I'm done with you, I'm restoring you by, so maybe not. I don't know. It's a weird thing. The whole thing with Azura and that guy before Swarm arrives and changes her back into a proper form. Did we really need that? It's a throwaway line in Once Upon a Time being like, if you keep killing people, you'll be imprisoned or you'll have your identity erased. And obviously Swarm got imprisoned and she had her identity erased. But like, what was that thing that crashed through? They didn't really explain what that was. Was that Division warning her? Was that Swarm being like, oh, I found you, I've tracked you with this thing? And he turns up and like, how did you know she was there? The Grand Serpent was like apparently banished probably, but how exactly did he get to Earth in the first place to do the whole unit thing? Like, why was he in that right place at that right time? Why was Kate Stewart in this episode? Why was the Division plot the plot that didn't get any development in the finale? What is Division? I still don't really understand what it is they do. If the Flux is just antimatter, why did the TARDIS not just know that it was antimatter when it scanned it in the first episode?
I think with that one, they do say that it's because it originated outside of the universe. The TARDIS didn't know what it was.
Right. But they have dealt with antimatter outside the universe before, but I guess that's classic series. They just want to ignore it, but it's fine. Carvanice is passed with the Doctor. I think that's a really interesting idea. That's just
so if you're never going to find out.
And they don't do anything with it. It's just very frustrating. It all comes across as, I want to leave a mark on Doctor Who, so I'm going to ask all these questions and do these reveals, but I don't actually want to do anything with them. I'm just going to leave it up in the air. It feels like very non-committal in that respect, and I think that's quite frustrating. And that's kind of one of those. And Carvanista is now the last of his kind. I don't think they needed to do that. I'm just like, what kind of next though? It just felt a bit, oh wow, okay. How did the Ravagers know all about Dan and Yaz? And then they're just like, Dan Lewis. They've got something. How do they know Diane's connection to her? When did they find her? Why they specifically target her and then just leave her behind because she's pointless? If she's pointless, why did you take her in the first place? Swarm tells Tectayun that she was the one who let him out in episode 5. Why did she do that? Surely he's just immediately going to try and find a way to go and kill her. And Division people were literally coming to check on him, so that seemed weird. Like, what's going on with that? What the fuck was the point of everything Yaz and Dan and Jericho did in episode 5 to find out when the end of the world was going to happen? It really didn't add anything. There's just so many things like that that maybe we get a few hints and answers towards, but I just don't think it's done very well. So that's kind of frustrating. Some stuff I think is just unanswered and will be left unanswered because the scene with the Doctor in time, where he's like, oh, you need to be wary of the forces moving against you and their master. That feels like, okay, this is what we're going to be focusing on next. So that screams to me like anything that was unanswered in this is not going to get answered because this is what the focus is going to be for the specials. So if that's the case, that's kind of frustrating. And that's why it's kind of annoying, because it felt like this is a statement of intent of what the focus is going to be now with that scene. So I'm like, okay, fine. There's just so many things like that. And it was my big fear when they threw so much at us. But yeah, it was just undercooked. I think you could have cut so many characters out, so many plot lines out And I do genuinely believe they planned a 10-episode series.
Yeah.
And they thought, okay, we're not going to cut any of it out though, but we're still just going to make it 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And I just think they needed to just sacrifice things if that was going to be the case. You know, I would not be surprised if the Grand Serpent in episode 3 and the person doing all the unit stuff was originally 2 different characters completely.
I have a theory about that, yeah.
I would not be surprised if that was the case, but they ended up being like, well, you know, we need to have the actors in a bubble, and we've got a big popular British actor in this role, so I guess we're going to give him more to do, even though what he gets to do is shit. But yeah, there's just so much not explained. I'm just like, why?
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's been an issue with Doctor Who, I think, for a while now, is when they keep putting questions in that just keep getting teased and teased and teased, and then either don't have a resolution or an unsatisfactory resolution. The silence in series 5 and 6, I think, is where it started.
See, I think that gets completely answered. I don't think the answer is necessarily good, but I don't think anything's left unexplained, apart from how did they blow up the TARDIS? That annoys me. Everything else I'm completely fine with.
Yeah, but with that, you know, it's introduced in series 5, but then we don't get the answer, the proper answer to that until Matt Smith's last episode. You know, that's when we realize, oh, that's where the silences come from, and that's why they're doing it, and that takes time, which is why I think a couple of these questions here, we could look back this time next year and think, oh, that's how it was answered. There you go. Again, they might not be satisfactory answers.
Yeah, and I do think with that, it's just a different way of doing things, because we've got the Timeless Children stuff well, that was teased in Jodie's second ever episode.
Yes.
And it's only now getting some payoff. It's just, I think, and it's not detriment to when Doctor Who came back, people are just assumed like 1 arc per series, that's how things must be. And they think that's what Doctor Who is, which it wasn't the case in the classic series. It was like multiple season arcs at times, things coming back round. You know, Omega appears in the 3rd Doctor story. He comes back for the 5th Doctor, and they just assume that you know what went on. And, you know, then Moffat, it was unfortunate because he thought Matt Smith was going to stay another year. So he had like a whole season on Trenzalore was going to be the plan. But his view was just he's going to tell one story across 1 Doctor's tenure. It's a similar kind of thing, I think, with Jodie. And, you know, if you prefer one arc per season, fair enough, because that is simpler. But, you know, I don't think it's necessarily fair to criticize them doing something different. When it does get payoff, you may not like the payoff.
No.
But, you know, it's a very complicated thing. But with this, it just seems like you are not going to get these answers, because this is what I'm focusing on now. And the fact that he's done this whole timeless child stuff, but when all is said and done, it feels like they might as well have just not bothered and just stuck with Hartnell being the first.
Yeah, especially when it's like, oh, here's my memories, keep them in the TARDIS, bye.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, that's the conclusion. And then she's like, unless I really ask for them. Like, commit.
Yeah, I get what you mean. One of my negatives is the still open questions, and I've got a few here. How did the Sontarans get past the shield again? I don't know. I know he's like point, because in the last I was like, oh, point all the weapons inwards. I'm like, what does that do? What was he like holding the Earth hostage to make the Lupari let the Sontarans in? Is that what happened?
I guess like because Unit wasn't around for some reason, that means the Sontarans can get back in. But again, it's just they don't explain like why that's the case.
And then it was also, were Swarm and Azure created by Division or just released by Division to kill the Doctor?
Yeah, I think they mentioned they're like, well, it's Tecteun say they're like ancient beings and stuff, but that is very open for interpretation. And again, when they're apparently the big bads of Flux, you probably want more confirmation. But again, because they just don't want to seem to commit either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come on to Swarm and Azure in a minute after these, because I do have some thoughts. Also, with Williamson, I think they answered it. You know, why were those rips in time? I think they say that the Flux is doing something to them, but I don't know if they're created by the Flux. That wasn't made clear, because they're changing a lot, which seems to happen because of the Flux. But were they there in the first place and then the Flux messed with them, or did the Flux create them? I think that's not explained well enough. It might be, in episode 2 they might say something. I don't know. I'm sure there's something somewhere, and when we go back and rewatch the whole series, maybe it'll be clearer. But they needed a line in there just saying Flux created these, and then fine, leave it there. How did the Grand Serpent get to Earth, which is one that you touched on, which leads me into my thought is that if there wasn't the pandemic, was he going to be the American man?
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but him.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Because because it makes me think that maybe they could have done the whole thing of
Robertson.
That's it. Unit was disbanded, and then Robertson comes in and funds Unit, and then makes a deal with the Sontarans. It feels like that's how it should have worked.
Yeah.
And he does have a precedent for working with aliens, as he tried to do with the Daleks in this previous episode. But obviously, maybe because of the pandemic, if he wasn't in the country, maybe it wasn't worth him coming in and doing a role with.
He's too busy filming the Sex and the City revival.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes me think that maybe the Grand Serpent was going to be 2 people. The one we saw was only going to be with Vinda, and then we would have had Robertson for the Unit stuff. Again, we might not know for another few years if that's going to be the case. There could be. It wouldn't surprise me if after Chibnall leaves, something will come out with him explaining all the issues there were. Maybe there'll be some behind the scenes stuff in the Blu-ray when that comes out. We'll see. But it does make me think that they should have been 2 different people. And why is the TARDIS still damaged? Is it just going to constantly be like that now because of the Flux?
Yeah,
because the Flux damaged. The Flux damaged it.
It was when
time was unleashed.
When the Flux destroyed Atropos and destroyed the temple.
Yeah,
time was partially unleashed until they fixed it. When that broke the TARDIS, but I guess it just stays broken and it's not repaired. It doesn't undo it. It's just like it's not going to get worse per se. Maybe. Yeah,
unless that's going to carry over into, because obviously
I think it will, based on the promo images for either the Daleks and the TARDIS are still cracked and stuff. So.
Yes, and based on the premise of that, spoilers if you haven't and don't want to know what it is, like skip ahead 20 seconds, but they're stuck in a time loop, which gives the impression that maybe there's still going to be some leftover time issues from when the temple was broken.
And it allows them to keep a limited cast in the same sets.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, we'll see how that comes on. Also, I think the universe, because I've seen a lot of people over the past days being like, oh, the universe is destroyed, it's only Earth left, which I don't think is the case. If you look at the map that is in Tectone's lab, that the UD is doing Flux on, you can still see multiple different galaxies in the universe. So it's clear that there's still galaxies out there, and it's not, the universe hasn't been destroyed type thing. It was going to be, but there's also a line where it's like, oh, the Ravagers are changing the destination of Flux or whatever. So it could be that they use Flux to destroy it. We're going to destroy Atropos first, or head that way first and end the rest. But
yeah, I think it was like that was going to be where it finished. I think that was going to be the last thing, because it was originally Earth and then they changed that to Atropos.
Yeah. So I don't think the universe is completely destroyed, and even so, we see that the Flux doesn't necessarily always destroy everything. Obviously, when we're introduced to Belle, she's going to a number of different planets that have been hit by the Flux but not destroyed. So I think the criticism of the universe has been destroyed should be thrown at this, because it's not the case. I don't think I admit it could have been explained better, and it's one of those questions that's still open to interpretation, which a few things are. But hey, what can you do? So what is your second negative?
It's only the second one. I guess I can include them all together, but my main thing, the Grand Serpent.
I
don't care about him. I don't care about him. He doesn't need to be in this. And maybe it's a COVID thing. They just needed to reuse the actor, so they thought, I'll just make this character the Grand Serpent.
Yeah.
But 25% of the last episode was ultimately pointless, because he didn't justify anything.
Yeah.
They could have just had the Sontarans learn from their first mistake, their first wave, like they did by having shields on their ships now. And that's how they find a way in or whatever. or just have summoners or let them in for chaos. I don't know. But yeah, he didn't need to be in there. Great as it was to see Kate Stewart again, I don't think she needed to be in there. And I don't think Claire needed to have much of a role either. They could have just had this sometimes be like, oh, our computers have located where the final Flux will be. Haha, let's go. Instead, they dedicate a whole thing to her working it out because she's psychic or whatever, and they need to set up Jericho dying. So sure. But yeah, they were kind of just dead weight in a story that already has so much going on. And, a key thing was division. That was all the last episode. And we just got nothing with that in this one. And maybe if we got rid of some of those characters, it would have been worth it. And yeah, the Grand Serpent was like the big one for me because he just had most of the screen time. Kate's resistance, like it was this random
non-existent, just one guy.
Just dies. Just a pointless storyline. His obsession with her, to me, I was like, why are you so obsessed with her? Like, get over it, mate. And yeah, just the scene of him like torturing the Doctor was good and all, but he worked infinitely better just as part of Vinder's backstory. And then even then, when it came down to it, there's no satisfaction to that resolution of Vinder banishing him because he doesn't even remember who Vinder is. I'm like, there's nothing satisfying about this because he doesn't even know you. Like, he's just been banished by a complete stranger for all he knows. So there's no haha moment there. It's just like, oh, okay. Yeah. And he's not dead, so they're probably going to bring the fucker back. And I hate that. But the actor did a great job. I just think they gave him a really boring character.
Yeah, I think, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. I think there's so much there for the character because he could be like a really menacing Swarm-esque, well, when you first meet Swarm, that kind of charming.
And how did he know to send an assassin to try and kill Yazandan and all that in 1901 or wherever it was?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Nothing came of that.
I forgot there was even an assassin there.
What was the point? How did he didn't even know who they were?
Yeah,
it was just so they could have an action sequence, and I'm just like, why?
Yes, that makes me think that maybe he'll come back. I like the actor. I think if you give him more, because there's a certain charisma there which I like with the character, which I think needs to be explored more. I do like the way he infiltrates the unit and I like that. And I wish that was him. He wasn't part of Vinder's back. It needs to be one or the other. It can't be both. Yeah. Which I think is the main issue here. Because I do like how he infiltrates the unit and how he like kills people off and he convinces people that he's still the same person, whatever. I like that. I do agree that his vendetta against Kate Stewart is a bit over the top, especially when he's just escaped. She escaped from explosion 2-3 years ago at this point. So I think that's a bit over the top. I think that could, again, maybe in another time there was a full episode where it was him and Kate and there was some back and forth and there's some history there that maybe we don't see.
Outside of Flux, that could have been a good villain and a good story, but there's just no place for it in this with the new format. Yeah,
I do agree. And that's why I think if he does come back, I think they've got some potential if they do it right. But I think if it's not done right again, that'll be the last straw for me, definitely. Which is unfortunate because, like I said, the actor is he's a good one. He obviously has quite a good reputation, I think, with British audiences, especially drama, because he's one of the sort of the best parts when people look at Line of Duty. He's one of the best parts of it that he's in. And yeah, I think, and there's more parallels with Line of Duty in the fact that the final season of Line of Duty suffered massively with its history and its everyone expecting big things to happen and everyone expecting twists and reveals and things like that, and it didn't quite have that. I think that's present here, and I think that's unfortunately going to be present in a lot of TV shows moving forward, because it's just, again, it all started with Game of Thrones. There was twists, there was reveals, and it would all be big moments, and then everyone expects that in TV shows and everyone theorizes it, and then that's why when it's every week there's more theories, more chances to be disappointed or let down or impressed, which it'll be a phase, it'll go out eventually. But anyway, Grand Serpent, I definitely agree. He is a spare part, I think is best labeled for this episode. So in that case, what is your third?
Third, yes.
Yeah.
I think Swarman is a ultimately comes down to, they're defeated very, very, very easily, very quickly. At that point, like watching the episode, I think there's like 6 minutes left by the time they have to deal with Swarm and Azure.
Yeah, there's like 1 minute left when they have to deal with the Grand Serpent.
Yeah, and then they have to do the Grand Serpent. Like, you'd at least give them the respect to have Swarm and Azure be last, surely. Then you go to the Grand Serpent, fine. But yeah, I just think the fact that you've gone so long without revealing what their proper motivations are, the fact that we then have time actually being an entity as well as a planet, and they worship it as a god, whatever. It's so out of their field. You're like, that is not even remotely like, okay, so they're not like the big bads after all. It's this person
they're
who's
just the servants to time, apparently.
Yeah, a reflection of your own self. And it just happens so quickly, and it's just so vaguely explained and done. It's just like, oh, you failed me, rah! But then Azor seems really happy about it. I'm like, yeah.
Storm's like,
what?
Azor's like, yay.
So what are you actually doing here? It's like, you failed, and why are you happy that you failed? It was after they were so strong presence-wise in the first couple of episodes, and particularly Swarm. The fact that I think they peaked with episode 2 or 3, and after that, I mean, it was only Azor in episode 4, but they've just felt like spare parts. It seemed like they sat down to write a scene and they flipped a coin like, who are we going to focus on? And the coin never landed on Storm and Azor for the most part when they were writing like the last couple of episodes.
They had a big board with a big wheel, and they went, whoom! Grand Serpent again. Yeah,
it's just such a damp squib. And Grand Serpent had more screen time than Swarm and Azor in the last couple of episodes. Like, what the hell's that about? And it's even more of a shame because they're good villains and good characters and great actors. If it was like, well, they may have been the big bads, but I didn't really care about them anyway, so I don't really mind that it kind of came down to a quick defeat and like, it's the fact that they started off so strong, and people were actually more interested in this brand new threat than the fact that the Daleks, the Cybermen, some Sontarans were going to be in it. I think it's such a crying shame that it came down to they had like 10 minutes of
I think especially because they were so easily like tricked to going to time so that they could work. It's like, oh, we're gonna stay here. Oh, you're right. We'll piss off. Well, this will be fine. The one slave that was working for Division that we've not really done anything with, I'm sure he won't touch anything. See you later. It's like, kill the Ood. That's the one thing you do. Kill the Ood. Like you kill Tectayun.
When do you not kill the Ood?
Exactly. That Ood is still sat there in that space between dimensions.
He's just alone forever.
It also makes me laugh that it's like Tectayun's like, oh, the Flux, oh no, kill, and then kill Tectayun's like, oh, the Flux, oh no. It didn't change anything with. They were interchangeable. I think Flux and Swarm and Tectayun. You could have just had Tectayun be the one. And like, just make that look like, make Swarm Tectayun and just have that.
Someone who the Doctor once considered her mother died. And they don't mention that in the final episode at all.
It's in the previously, but that's it. I completely agree. Swarm and Azure are sort of on my negative list. As sort of mentioned earlier, they could easily just be one person. There's no need for them to be two separate people, I don't think. If anything, that probably harms both of them because, as we mentioned, Swarm doesn't get much in this episode, Azure didn't get much in the previous episodes. You make them both the same one. Great. Then there's no screen time to split. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I think they just they lost their spark halfway through. They were so intriguing, especially because it was all the backstory of we've had so many battles before, we've fought so many times, but you don't see that.
We see one time and
you see the last time. The one thing I do disagree with, a lot of people have sort of said that Swarm and Azure get defeated like the same way that they got defeated in the past. I'm like, what? They don't. They literally don't.
No,
that doesn't make any sense. They don't.
Time had nothing to do with it.
Time kills them this time because they failed. In the first one, they've got hostages and I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something.
Carbonista shoots them.
And Carbonista puts them in the square.
They just need to bring Carbonista in.
Exactly.
A couple of episodes ago, just shoot them with his gun thing. Sorted.
And it just. So I disagree with that. I do disagree that they're defeated easily, but I disagree that they're defeated the same way. And again, I think it's just they were like, oh shit, how are we finishing this up with them? We'll just do this. It's fine.
Yeah.
Again,
so I think it's clever, like the whole 3 doctors split apart thing.
Yes.
That they don't know that that's happening.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. That happens completely underneath their nose. But
yeah,
then it's like, oh, and also time's a natural thing, and they worship it, and oh, now it's killed them.
And then don't have the Doctor trick them to going to Atropos either. Like, have that be them say, right, we're going to Atropos to sacrifice you. Don't have her be like, do you want to go somewhere? Because then that makes them look stupid. I think. But it's fine. I mean, I think we could get more of them again, because it very much felt like this left plenty of channels open for spin-offs. I think, I don't know whether they will with Chibnall leaving, but maybe it's some part of Russell's plan. He wants to do spin-offs, and he's got these in place, because you could easily do Carvanista, Bell and Binder, have a spin-off with them. You could easily do more Jericho stuff in the past. You could easily do Sorman Azure versus the Fugitive Doctor as a spin-off if they wanted to. If they've had so many battles, you could easily do that. You could even do that in Big Finish or comics or books. So there's still space to do stuff. But also it's now, how that's going to end with them. So is it going to be more satisfying or less satisfying if you give them all these grand adventures beforehand, only for them to be killed because time was like, you failed me, bye, and then gets rid of them. But yeah, I mean, part of me is like, at least we know what the weird flying butterfly things were in the first 2 episodes. It was time being unleashed. So maybe they could have played more into that. It's the fact that when the temple was broken, physical time came out, and they probably could have made it look more like it was time by maybe, instead of just disintegrating people, have them age rapidly and then disintegrate, because then it gives the impression that that's time attacking them.
Yeah, it felt like with those things flying about and what Swarm is saying, like, oh, you are space and we are time. It felt like Chibnall thought that was him setting up for the big reveal that time is actually a thing, and that's what they were worshipping. It's an entity. But none of those hints would even remotely point you in that direction. So I just don't think the payoff's there. So it just completely comes out of left field.
Not to mention the bit where someone's like, you are the universe, and like disintegrates half the Doctor and then puts it back together again. I'm like, that again, that could be a good like thing to showcase he's controlling time. Like, think of it as Doctor Strange, where he ages something with the apple and turns it back again. Do something like that. But maybe budget, maybe it was just easier to do a disintegration thing than it was to age, which I'm sure it is. We've seen what happens when they try and age people rapidly in Doctor Who. It's the weird David Tennant thing. So it's probably good that they don't do it. But yeah, they were just, unfortunately, as with a couple of things, a spare part. Claire the same. I think they just wanted to have all the characters back for one last episode, which is fine. I don't think she's there, she serves a purpose, and then she's gone again, which is fine. She could come back later. And there could be, she's with Kate Stewart, isn't she, at the end? So it wouldn't surprise me again if they want to do a spin-off. She could be working with Kate and Osgood in another spin-off. So there's plenty of ways to expand the universe outside of the main show. Whether or not they will, we don't know what Russell's thinking when he's going to come in and take over, whether he's going to want to pick up any of them threads if they're still there. Because we know that he intended to leave his future showrunners threads for them to pick up if they wanted to, but they were going to do the Master's Ring. In the end, he picked that up himself, but it would have been there. So there's all sorts of things that maybe could go forwards, but unfortunately, I don't think that's the time for it, and there definitely wasn't the time for it in this episode. Oh, sadly. But I feel like although we're quite harsh, I did enjoy the episode. I did think, I don't think I wasn't bored, and I think this series has definitely been the most consistent in terms of enjoyment in the episodes. I think I've enjoyed every episode.
There's not been an episode that like I'll skip that one if I rewatch the series,
which I think is good, and is definitely the only series for Jodie that I've thought that. Because I've had, especially with her first series, I think there are plenty of slow burners in that one. But with this one, every episode I enjoyed, and maybe that will change when we go through and we watch all and see all the arcs go out. But at the minute, enjoyed this, enjoyed every episode. But it just needs fine tuning, I think. And I'm sure in the future, somewhere down the road, we'll eventually find out what exactly went on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
In some form, but who knows? Maybe when Chibnall does some Comic-Con appearances in the future, people will ask him and it'll get into the press, hopefully.
Yeah.
So in that case, we'll quickly scooch on to your fun fact.
I do have one more negative I want to talk about.
Oh, yeah, go on.
The chocolate scene.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I don't think I'm being dramatic.
Mhm.
Maybe I am because it's very recent. I genuinely think that's my least favorite scene in Doctor Who.
Uh-huh.
I know that's incredibly subjective. I'm not saying it's a bad scene by any means, because there's going to be loads of kids watching that, laughing their asses off.
Yeah.
Good for them. Well done. I hated every second. I think that was just, when you have Sontarans booting out Carvanista's entire race and we don't see it, and yet we see that. I'm sure it's like a budget thing, whatever. But you also spend so much of the Sontaran screen time in this entire series focusing on the weakness they already have with the probe event and using that like 100 times. Adding another one just seems already a bit redundant. And then they need to bribe us on trying anything, but like just threaten it with something else. Get Carvanista to like threaten it or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, that I just not my thing, not my humor.
Yeah, I
hated it.
I think if they established, because they use some tech words, don't they, to say why he's obsessed with the chocolate, something in it, I guess. But if they establish that in the first Sontaran episode, maybe that's something. But also, maybe them eating chocolate is a reaction to them being caught out with their feeding time. Maybe instead of doing
I think that's what they try and explain, and that's what they say.
So it should have been that.
Why is not every single Sontaran then going for that? Because they all need it. But it seems to just be one specific one so that they can bribe that one specific one. It's just not consistent and doesn't work. And for me, it isn't funny. But I understand completely that some people are going to really enjoy that. I find it funny.
I must confess, I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah, I know you would. But for me, I find that infinitely more harmful for the Sontarans than anything that's come before.
Yeah. I do agree. And it does go against my making the Sontarans look like idiots thing. But part of me can forgive this one because it's kind of based on a reason. Whereas when they've previously been presented as idiots, there's no reason for them to be that stupid. Whereas I think in this one, at least, if we look into it and if we think what we think, they're supposed to be telling us, this Sontaran is like feeding. It makes sense why he's doing it, but I also agree that it seems like
it's just like he's taking the fizzy drinks and stuff as well, but then it's all about chocolate suddenly, and and I know like the only scene you really have a problem with is the Time of the Doctor one, because you're fine with Strax because that's just one Sontaran. And the only other time is those idiot Sontarans, which is idiotic. That's 20 seconds versus this like 2-3 minute scene. I just like,
but then again, this is also just one Sontaran. It's not like the whole of them. So
but maybe all of them are supposed to be suffering from this, and it's not. So it completely contradicts itself instantly.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I found it funny, and I thought in an episode where it's supposed to be quite dramatic, it does add a moment of levity, especially for the young uns that will be watching it. But I can imagine quite a few people will not like it, which is fair enough. As you mentioned, it's all subjective.
I've seen it's very Marmite. It's very 50-50 from what I've seen online. So I'm just in one of those camps.
And that's the whole episode.
I'm not going to shit on people who really liked it because it's subjective.
And that's it's the whole series, the whole show is subjective. You can like it, you can not like it. That's fine. Have discussions with people about what you did like and what you didn't like, but don't tell people that they're stupid for liking it or stupid that they didn't like it. But have conversations and discuss the show nicely.
And if you can't, be quiet.
And if you can, and if you see someone enjoying it and you just want to go in and say, oh, it was rubbish, just don't. Just keep going. It's fine.
Keep scrolling.
I mean, to be honest, same with the other way around. If you see someone not liking it, don't jump in there and say, "Oh, you just didn't get it," or "Oh,
Yeah, it works both
whatever."
ways. Yeah.
Just keep walking. Block them if you don't. If you don't want to see it and they keep posting stuff like that, block them.
Yeah.
That'll remove it from your feed. It'll create an echo chamber, sure, but at least it'll be an echo chamber of things you like, rather
Yes.
than not. And at least it's only an echo chamber of Doctor Who, not racism. So
It's true.
there are worse things to be in an echo chamber of. So yes, I believe you have one fun fact.
I do. And even then, we've kind of almost heard it before in a way. So remember how for the Halloween Apocalypse, it was the 5th episode of the Revived series to be set on the day it was broadcast?
Oh, yeah.
This is the 6th episode of
Oh,
Revived series
no.
to be set on the day it was broadcast. Surprise.
Oh,
Happy fun fact, everyone.
Oh, lovely.
I was hoping for more when I opened the wiki, but it's like, no. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So it's not fun facts, it's fun fact today.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like it when they do that.
I do
when
as
they
well.
set it on the day, because it makes things a lot easier to follow in terms of when things are happening. Looking at you, Russell, and your year gap in series 1 to 4 ruins everything. Because then Moffat ignores it, and we're like, well, I don't even know when we meet Amy Pond the first time. Is it the 90s? It must be the 90s, surely, because she's a kid. And then we travel like 10 years into the future. So she must be, stop messing with time. Just have it on the days, or just don't specify.
Stop messing with time travel show.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, never mind. It's fine. I'll deal with it.
I mean, it was 2005 and you still haven't dealt with it. Okay.
No, right. It's because it only started to bother me now. I didn't care when I was younger. It didn't matter when I was younger, but now every time I'm like, yeah, this was set in 2007. I'm like, no, you idiot, it was 2008. Ruined it. So the because it means that end of time takes place after the 11th hour.
Yeah,
which is why it annoys me so much. I'm like, at least have it before, because it doesn't make sense that Gallifrey is coming through the sky at the same time that Pandorica is opening. Just set it the year after.
Doctor Who's never gone against canon before in such a way.
Definitely
never
hasn't.
Contradicts itself time
never,
and time again.
It never does. Definitely hasn't in this series.
It's not like the Doctor's met Mary Shelley like 4 times across all different mediums.
Oh God, it's fine. I can deal with it. It's just me being petty. I'm not going to be like, I'm never watching this show again because it's a year out of sync, because that's stupid. Yes. But never mind. It does bring us on to the last item on the agenda, rating the episode.
Oh God.
Out of 10, what are you going to give it?
What do I give it? I'm thinking 7.5-ish, but I don't quite know where I'd land on that. Is it my least favorite episode of the series? I don't know.
Let me see because I think this is better for me than episode 2, which was my least favorite.
Oh, really? I think maybe I preferred. I'm gonna go for 7.
Yeah, I think I will also go 7. I think mainly because of the sort of still unanswered questions, I think knocks it down a 0.5.
Yeah, it's just some little frustrations like that.
Yeah, which I mean, that's still good. That's
I mean, that puts it near the middle, I think, for me. So
pretty high on Metacritic. So that's that's
20%.
fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, I think.
It's the first in uni, so
yeah, there you go. Exactly. This is exactly what I didn't get. Oh, it's fine. I can deal. I'll write my 7 down. But yeah, I think that's it for Flux, as far as we're aware. So the next new Doctor Who that we'll be discussing will be the New Year's special, Eve of the Daleks. Shocker! It's another Dalek special on New Year's Day. Who'd have guessed?
People have already started moaning about that.
Yeah, I know. It's like, you knew it was coming. Deal with it. Stop.
They've been moaning about how the change in format doesn't work, and then they're like, "Oh, another Dalek New Year special!" Like, it's a trilogy.
Yeah. I know. And maybe it's because they was in this series. Maybe if they weren't in this series, people might have been a bit more relaxed. But who knows? And I'm
Doctor Who fans, relaxed.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I'm hoping that the Flux will still impact this special and the ones coming forwards. I hope it's not just like forgotten.
Yeah, I've in the Review of Death's podcast about this episode, Billy made a very cool point that I think I would love to see in the specials, is they treat the Flux like the blip in the MCU, and that's how they discuss it. I think that'd be a really cool way of moving forward with it.
Yeah.
So if the specials do that, that'd be quite fun. So we'll see.
And I think there's obviously some parallels with Flux and the MCU, especially with people getting snapped and dusted away and all that kind of jazz. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens. It seems like our TARDIS trilogy, TARDIS trio, are stuck in some kind of time loop with a couple of other people, and there are Daleks involved somehow. So I'm going to be very interested to see what happens, and then it leads into the 2 remaining specials after New Year, I think. Yeah,
there's this Dalek one. Then, based on what we've seen from filming stuff, there's a pirate one. Then it's Joe's last one, whatever the hell that is.
Oh, pirate one. The last pirate episode we had wasn't very good, so that's.
Yes, but this one's about a female pirate hero, so people are going to love it.
Oh boy. Yes, interesting. But yeah, so I don't know when the middle one is airing, but I think the final one is during November for the BBC's centenary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that one wouldn't surprise me if that's the one that will have the master in it and stuff like that.
I think that'll be the case, yeah.
But we will see what happens moving forwards. As for other videos on this channel, we will have our continued rewatch of Doctor Who going. This week we're back with Fires of Pompeii, if you want to check that out. And also over on Liam's channel, we are also currently watching Hawkeye, which it's episode 4 tomorrow, as of time of recording, today in terms of release. So by all means, go and check that out as well. It'll probably be up Thursday-ish, as long as the copyright gods are on your side. But yes, I think that's it for us this week. That is it for Doctor Who Flux. I had quite a good time, I think, with it. I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching it and looking forward to seeing the conversations. I'm more looking forward to see how it is remembered a few years down the line than now. Obviously that's a long wait, but it'll be very interesting if we're still doing this in God knows how many years time when we eventually return to Flux, how we see it.
That'd be so long.
But we will see whenever that catches up with us, or maybe the Earth boils before that point. Who knows? It's getting close. But yeah, that's it. By all means, stick around on the channel to have a look at some of the other videos. If not, I don't know. Yeah, see you next time. Bye.
Bye.